listening to Cowboy Logic with Jason Forby, a message of grace and hope.
Is everybody good? We've been talking about for a few weeks knowing God. It's important to what you know about God is right? Because if you grew up in religion, you had a lot of ideas about God that you thought about God that weren't true. But the things you think about God have a direct influence on your experience with God, right? We read 2 Peter over and over where he said, grace and peace is multiplied to you through the knowledge of God and our Lord Jesus Christ. So grace and peace is multiplied to you through what you know. So by knowing something, grace and peace is multiplied to you, right? So that's what we've been talking about. Once that relationship is kind of restored back to where it should be, what does it look like then? There's a place where if you've lived a long time with some hurt, you might have some trust issues. I mean, if you've been told your whole life that God caused your pain, maybe you weren't even told, but you had the thought or whatever. If you've thought for any length of time that God caused your pain, or He at least allowed it and turned His head for a little while, then you might have some trust issues. You can go to church and you can do whatever, quote however many verses. You can even have fish on your car and all the stuff. But if you have a little bit of trust issues because you thought God was responsible for your pain, you say, oh yeah, trust God. But that's not, how many know, that's not always as easy to do as it is to say. Come on, do I got the right bunch here or not? So I'm saying, so once we get to that place to where, you know what, I've realized now that the enemy come to steal, kill, and destroy, and that God wants me to be blessed. And I think the translation we read, the thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I've come that you might have a rich and satisfied life, is what Jesus said. I've come that you might have a rich and satisfied life. So we got reconciled last week, right? We put everybody in the right responsibility and said, I'm going to at least open my heart and sit down at the table and let God heal me and mend me and at least start the process of the responsibility on Him to rebuild this trust. It might be a process, right? So rebuilding the trust. And so what does it look like now? And so once we're back sitting at the table and once we're back close and we have this relationship being healed, right? What does that look like? Because I think once you're in that posture, there's some things that can then happen that maybe weren't necessarily happening before you were in that posture, right? Let me say it like this. The love of God is at the maximum level of intensity and availability at every minute. He will never have more love for you than He does right now at this minute, right? But how many know that just because that love is there to the maximum amount, our level of receiving that love might be... You see what I'm saying? So the level of receiving could be at different levels, even though the love is there to the maximum amount, right? So if He's loving me, but I'm full of resentment and I'm full of ideas that I've had about Him, I'll actually resist the things of God and resist the love of God and live my life without it, even though it's there for the taking, right? You get what I'm saying? So there's a level of receiving that thing that when you get in this posture, when you sit down at the table and get vulnerable and say, I'm going to put my heart in your hands and just let you rebuild this trust and all of this stuff. It's like, then now there's a receiving that starts to happen and there's more of the love of God that can pierce through and get to me. And so then what does life look like now that we're in this posture? Okay? Got it? I don't know if I'm getting this out or not. So let's read Romans 8. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't guess anybody's exempt from experiencing some sort of hell. And what I'm saying is what you do with it, in it, and after it is going to have an impact on your experience. Does that make sense? If you stay with me, I'll eventually get it out, all right? Oh boy. Let's read this, Romans 8. Everybody knows this. This is so good. This is the Passion Translation. Romans 8, verse 28 says this, so we are convinced that every detail of our lives is continually woven together to fit into God's perfect plan of bringing good into our lives. For we are His lovers who have been called to fulfill His designed purpose. More familiar translations are going to say, we know that all things work together for the good to those that are called. You know what I'm saying? He didn't say all things are good. All things work together for the good. I like the Passion. Other translations kind of put it on you, like if you love God. I don't think that's real accurate. I think love starts with Him. We love because He first loved, John said. So I like the Passion. It says this, so we are convinced that every detail of our lives is continually woven together to fit into God's perfect plan of bringing good into our lives. For we are His lovers who have been called to fulfill His design purpose. Let me just read it all and I'll come back to it. For He knew all about us before we were born, and He destined us from the beginning to share the likeness of His Son. This means the Son is the oldest among a vast family of brothers and sisters who will become just like Him. Who will become just like Him. Having determined our destiny ahead of time, He called us to Himself and transferred His perfect righteousness to everyone He called. And those who possess His perfect righteousness, He co-glorified with His Son. And this is so good. Those who possess His perfect righteousness, it was a gift, right? He co-glorified with His Son. So what does all this mean? If God is determined to stand with us, tell me, who then could ever stand against us? For God has proved His love by giving us His greatest treasure, the gift of His Son. And since God freely offered Him up as the sacrifice for us all, He certainly won't withhold from us anything else He has to give. Who then would dare to accuse those whom God has chosen in love to be His? God Himself is the judge who has issued His final verdict over them, not guilty. Who then is left to condemn us? Certainly not Jesus, the Anointed One, for He gave His life for us, and even more than that, He has conquered death and is now risen, exalted, and enthroned by God at His right hand. So how could He possibly condemn us, since He is continually praying for our triumph? Who could ever separate us from this endless love of God's Anointed One? Absolutely no one. For nothing in the universe has the power to diminish His love toward us. Troubles, pressures, and problems are unable to come between us and heaven's love. What about persecutions, deprivations, dangers, death threats? Nope, for they are all impotent to hinder omnipotent. Something like that. You guys look it up. You can see it. 37. Yet even in the midst of all these things, we triumph over them all. Even in the midst of all these things, we triumph over them all. For God has made us to be more than conquerors, and His demonstrated love is our glorious victory over everything. So now I live with the confidence that there is nothing in the universe with the power to separate us from God's love. I'm convinced that His love will triumph over death, life's troubles, fallen angels, or dark rulers in the heavens. There is nothing in our present or future circumstances that can weaken His love. There is nothing in our present or future circumstances that can weaken His love. There is no power above us or beneath us, no power that could ever be found in the universe that can distance us from God's passionate love, which is lavished upon us through our Lord Jesus, the Anointed One. You got it? Notice how your past wasn't on the list. Nothing present nor nothing future, but past wasn't on the list. I think because our perspective could put us in a place to where we're resisting it and not being in the place of receiving it. You got it? All right, so I could just read that and it'd all be good enough. But let's go to the front of the thing, the famous one where we said that all things work together for good. It's like, what does that even mean? It's the posture of being in the place now of, okay, I'm no longer blaming God and our hearts are restored and I'm back in this place where He's building His trust in me and it's the goodness of God now. You got it? So it's like, what does this look like now? It's like everything that I went through, that I was blaming God and I was letting that thing destroy me and put my heart in a place where I was resisting the love of God. Now that I'm in this posture, it puts me in the place where the love of God now turns that thing on its head and He starts using that for my good. I'm going to keep trying to get this out somehow. There's a place to live where you can either be heartbroken and resentful and resist the things of God, or there's a place to live that says, you know what, I might be going through hell right now, but I know who's responsible for it, and I know who's on my side, and I know who's never going to turn against me. And what I'm going through might not seem good, but I know before it's all over with that the one that's for me is going to work this thing out somehow. Interwoven, the Passion said, that somehow this is going to end up going in my favor, and he's going to use it to bless me. Come on, can I just put it in my own experience? And I'm trying to keep everything biblical and scripturally accurate and all that, but you can't argue with my experience. I know I've been to hell and back a few times. How many know you ever been to hell and back and you thought, man, I don't know how we're going to recover from this. I don't know how we're going to even get out of this. And it's like last week we talked about, or Satan and God had a conversation about Job. I thought that's interesting. Whenever I first started seeing that, I thought, man, if Satan and God's having a conversation and God brought it up. God said, hey, have you considered my servant Job? You know, and I thought, golly, I said, God, if you and Satan's ever have a conversation, leave my name out of it, would you? Don't be bringing up nothing about Jason. You know what I'm saying? But I thought about the conversation about things that if Jason was in the conversation, I can see things happening now to where I got stolen from, I got tried to be destroyed, I got experienced things that were devastating and all this and that, and things robbed out of my life and turned upside down. Come on, has anybody ever been there? And then I thought about the conversation. It changed now. I'm no longer hurt by what I'm going through and distanced from God and resisting the love of God. Now I'm on the right side of the things, and I think the conversation is now different. It goes something like this. This is my own story. I think God would say, I'm a loving father, and I would have never broke that boy's heart. I would have never taken that from him. I would have never stole from him. But since you did, you moved something out of the way that I would have never done. But since you did, you've made room for me to bring in something way better and come on. It's just a posture. I'm telling you, this is part of this thing where I'm no longer resenting God. I'm just decided that He's good and He has this love that we read about, that I want to receive all that I can stand. You know what I'm saying? I always say, my saying is, I want all I can stand and a quarter turn more. How much can I handle this love of God that He has for me? I'm just telling you, once you decide to start trusting Him and allowing Him at least the opportunity to start building that trust back, to say that everything that I've been through, even the bad, He's somehow working it out and it's going my way. I can honestly say everything, the worst days, the things that I thought were the worst days and things that got stole from me, the way I know God now because of the things that I had to walk through, I wouldn't go back and undo that stuff now. Come on, have I got the right bunch? Remember last week we said, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, in presence of my enemies, He prepares a table before me. I'm thinking, man, walking through that valley with enemies nipping at my heels, trying to destroy me and telling me that God was responsible for my pain and I wouldn't even sit down at the meal that He was preparing for me. Once I finally did sit down at the meal and sit down at the table and let God teach me and show me and heal me and bring me nourishment and restore me and give my strength back, now we get to the place where I say, you know what? I wouldn't know God in that way if I hadn't had to go. So it's to the point now where I'm saying, you know what? You bring it on, big boy. Every time you've stole from me, all it's done is take me to a higher level. Come on, you got what I'm saying? It's like if we really understood this, we wouldn't be crying any longer. We'd be shouting and celebrating. I'm telling you, that enemy, that lying, thieving rascal, every time he drives by my driveway now, he weighs the cost. Drives right on by, because he says every time I tried to mess with that boy, it cost me, and it took him to a higher level, and now he's thumping my head everywhere I turn around, and I'm just going to leave him alone from now on. Have I got the right bunch or not? Here, let's say, you know, David would have never been king if it wouldn't been for Goliath. We look at Goliath and cry and carry on, say, this is the end, what are we going to do? instead of seeing it as an avenue for your promotion to go higher and to say, God is for me and no one can be against me, and the love of God is the most powerful thing I can experience, and I know I'm His son. He's co-glorified me because He gave me His righteousness, and I'm in this deal, and everything I go through, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's whatever, you read the list, it makes no difference to Him. He can take all of it and turn it on its head and serve it back to me, and it's going to be good, and it's going to be working my way, and we're just going to go higher. And come on, am I getting it out or not? You guys good? So I think we could just celebrate instead of cry, don't you? I'm just saying, what you're going through right now, I don't know, might be hell. And I don't wish it for anybody. I wish every day was just great. And when every day was on top of the mountain and all that, I wish it was that way. But for some reason it ain't. We all got life somehow. The tricky thing about this life, you do it with people. People something, ain't they? You guys got people? Yeah, we all got people, don't we? So it can just be tricky and messy. But I'm just telling you, you can have this, knowing that we're no longer separated from God, knowing that all this stuff and the resentment and all that we dealt with last week, now we're free to have just this awesome relationship with the heart of God and let Him bless us and love us and show us and just do what only He can do, is to turn that stuff around and make it for our good. And then we look up down the road and think, wow, how in the world did He even pull all that together? It's like, now I can understand why David said, it was good for me that I'd been afflicted. I'm just telling you, if you'll stay in this posture here, it's how you make the enemy pay.
Please follow and share this message. And for more information, visit srcowboychurch.com.